Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Ethos Online. Again, this is a space where we can be, belong, and become the very best version of ourselves. So, wherever you're joining us, whether it's Michigan, Colorado, all those other states, we just want to say thank you for walking with us in this journey. This journey through delving into a really powerful compilation of stories, messages from kings, epic mythologies, all of this. We just love delving into this with you. And so it takes hours of research, a lot of time recording all of these things to put this together. And so we're grateful for your viewership. We're grateful when you share these messages. So today we continue to delve into Genesis, right? And a reminder to anyone joining us for the first time, Genesis was not it was not a book written to give a precise history of dates and times. That's not how they wrote back then, right? For them, they wrote as a response to Babylonian captivity, 587 BC. Now remember, Israel had already been through captivity with the Assyrians. And so once again, they're back in captivity. Babylon is this large encompassing empire. They take hold of all of these tiny tribes, Israel being one of them. And they march them hundreds of miles on foot. They get them into their cities and they basically indoctrinate them with Babylonian culture, Babylonian gods, Babylonian rituals. And so this is what they do. And so Israel is one of the few monotheistic cultures that says we are not going to assimilate. Right, we are not going to lose our traditions and our stories. We're not going to lose our ritual. We're not going to lose what it means to be Jewish, right? And so Torah is a written response to the fears of assimilation. So every time Torah is opened, right? We talk about this weekly. It was a blessing. Every time it's opened, the readers are in awe because what this has done is not captured their history. It's captured the essence of what it meant to be an Israelite. Yeah, it actually brings more meaning knowing it's not a historical book. It's something so much bigger. And so it's a book of a compilation, right? Poetry, mythology, poetic musings, prophetic warnings, messages from kings. It's all of these things. And so Torah, what we love to say every week, Torah is a complete narrative of Israel miniaturized through its tellings. What does that mean? Right? What does that even mean? It means this. Every time you read of a character, every time you read a story in Torah, always keep in mind Israel, the original audience, right? This was not meant for 21st century Christians or evangelicals. This was not meant for you and me. This was meant for Jewish people, right? And so if you were Jewish, what you would notice is every single story is your story. It's your nation's story being told over and over again through different characters, through different scenarios, different settings. It's your story. And so we've talked about different characters, right? We've talked about many, Moses, Noah. We've talked about Adam, Eve, Cain, Abel, all these different people. And so each one of them is going to be a connection to what Israel looks like. And so, of course, Abraham, right? We're in chapter 18, second portion of it. Abraham is the founder, the one that helps Israel step away from tradition into something new, births the new thing. And so today we'll delve into chapter 18, 20 through the rest of the chapter. I believe it's through 34. So I'll begin by reading through this big chunk of verses, and we'll delve into this. And what you'll notice about this section is there's a lot of kind of repetitive concepts in this. So we'll kind of move through it a little faster in some of these portions, but the meaning's there. So we'll open it up in a minute. Here we go. Genesis chapter 18, verse 20. And the Lord said, "Since the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah has become great," and remember, he's talking to Abraham here, and their sin has become very grave, "I will descend now and see whether according to her cry, which has come to me, they have done. I will wreak havoc, a destruction upon them. And if not, I will know." And the men turned from there and went to Sodom. And Abraham was still standing before the Lord. And Abraham approached and said, will you even destroy the righteous with the wicked? Perhaps there are 50 righteous men in the midst of the city. Will you even destroy and not forgive the place for the sake of the 50 righteous men who are in the midst? Far be it for you to do a thing such as this, to put to death the righteous with the wicked, so that the righteous should be like the wicked. Far be it from you. Will the judge of the entire earth not perform justice? And the Lord said, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous men within the city, I will forgive the entire place for their sake. Pretty good, right? 27. And Abraham answered and said, sorry, I'm thinking of Lot in the next section. Behold, now I have commenced to speak to the Lord, although I am dust and ashes. Notice this kind of foreshadowing, dust and ashes, right? A very Jewish concept. Perhaps the 50 righteous men will be missing 5. Right? Here's Abraham kind of, he's playing along here. He's kind of, well, what if this then, right? Will you destroy the entire city because of 5? And he said, I will not destroy the city for their 45. And he continued further to speak to him. And he said, perhaps 40 will be found there. And he said, I will not do it for the sake of 40. And he said, please let the Lord's wrath not be kindled, and I will speak. Perhaps 30 will be found there. And he said, I will not do it if I find 30 there. So again, Abraham's kind of whittling away here, right? How low will you go? And he said, behold, now I have desired to speak to the Lord. Perhaps, right? Perhaps 20 will be found there. And he said, I will not destroy for the sake of 20. And he said, please, right? And again, you can imagine like the story. He's talking to the, God, right? The divine Yahweh. What if he's kind of, again, he's doing his best to kind of whittle it down further and further and further, right? He's bargaining with the divine. And so, please let the Lord's wrath not be kindled, and I will speak yet this time, perhaps 10 will be found there. And he said, I will not destroy for the sake of 10. Know this, readers during that time era, if they're reading this, they are blown away. What I just read to you would have seemed insane if you were from any other tribe, any other nation. This would have seemed absolutely bizarre. Abraham bargaining with their God? Right? So let's delve into this. This is a fascinating section here. And the Lord said, since the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah has become great, and since their sin has become very grave, I will descend now and see whether according to her cry, which has come to me, they have done. I will wreak destruction upon them, and if not, I will know. So the Hebrew God, watch this now in this story here, he hears the cry of his people. So as an Israelite, right, as a Jewish person, when you read this, you immediately make connection, right? Your story is all about crying out to God in the middle of brokenness, in the middle of captivity. They are in the middle of Babylonian captivity compiling this, and they are what? Yeah, they are crying out. To be a Jewish person is to cry out to the divine, whether you're in Egypt, Rome, Babylon, Assyria, you cry out to the divine. So when good people cry out for justice, right? When good people cry out for justice, God, the divine shows up. The divine shows a way to bring that justice forth. Yeah. And so a couple different ways of viewing this story. Many people will say it's literal. Like this literally happened. Everything exactly how it is. Other people say, I think this is more symbolic. So I'm going to give you both kind of concepts here. And I would say choose your own adventure, right? Which works for you. I don't know that there's a great way to say for certain whether it's true or not. We weren't there, were we? And so either way, though, whether it's literal or symbolic, it's true in a deep sense, right? It's true because the thing continues to happen. When we find the meaning, when we pull it out in a few minutes, we'll understand the deeper meaning is what's really important here. What Israel as a nation was hearing, that's what's important. The message, right? Whether it happened or didn't exactly happen that way, that's not as important, right? But if you took it literally, right? This God literally was about to make up his mind whether to burn an entire city of people, right? Much like the flood, because of their bad deeds, right? So there's that way of viewing it. And truth be told, I think I struggle with this one a little bit. The idea that God, because of the actions of people, would just burn an entire group of people, is that loving, right? Is that a loving action from God? Well, I don't know. Those kind of questions will come up. If God is love, um, where is the love in that? Putting people out of their misery? Well, some people would say that. Is God removing his presence, and by the removal of his presence, somehow now the city burns? I don't know. All different concepts people will consider when you look at it very literally. Now, there is, of course, the literary element of it, right? There is this idea that this could be more of a metaphorical story. And so, in almost all literature, um, epic heroes, they bargain with the gods. You will see this again, all different kinds of literature. Again, Babylonian, Egyptian, Greek, Roman, they all have these different heroes, these protagonists that when they sit down, they cry out for their people. And oftentimes they'll go on some really big epic adventure. And at the end of the epic adventure, the gods will give them some kind of reward. And often what they'll do is they'll bargain. They will be the individual who kind of stands in between the God and that wrath, right? And for Israel, for the Jewish tradition, the one who kind of stands in between the Father and the people is the messianic person, the messianic archetype. And so you can see kind of where I'm going with this. Abraham, he is the one that stands in between the Father and the people. Moses will do the same, right? And what you'll find is Jesus, the same language will be used for Jesus, right? The Son stands before the Father for the people. You see this over and over again. In that element, of course, that's more of a Roman kind of language being used there. But you get my drift here. The idea here is you could also look at it in the metaphorical way that this is kind of a borrowing of literary tradition. So either way you look at it, understand there is a deeper meaning coming up. So let's delve into it. And the men turned from there and went to Sodom, and Abraham was still standing before the Lord. And Abraham approached and said, "Will you even destroy the righteous with the wicked?" Please understand this. There is a deep, deep question going on here. The question is not necessarily the action. The question is, God, are you just? Are you good? Yeah. And I think many of us have asked that question, right? Are you good? Are you just? And so the answer is going to follow. And again, the answer is not one that we'd like for God just to say, no, I won't kill anybody. I'll just rainbows and sunshine and all that. But that's not the culture this is written in, right? So we have to place ourselves again in that ancient culture. The question is God just? Do these people deserve to be burned? Well, in that ancient culture, they'd probably say yes, right? However, God's going to flip the script a bit. And so I love this quote here. The question of the conversation between Abraham and God is one of deep justice. The question is God just or not? And so while other gods in all these other stories, they would all destroy cities, no questions asked, over like ridiculous things. Whether it's Egyptian, Babylonian, Greek, Roman, all of these stories had these gods that the slightest injustice, the slightest mark on their good name, and they would go overboard and kill entire swaths of cities and people. Sometimes the whole world would be in chaos because some god slept with another god who slept with this person or that person. It's chaos. And so the question is, what's Israel's God like? Is Israel's God going to be just or not? Well, the answer is this God, Israel's God, unlike the Babylonian ones, Israel's God shows grace. Watch this. Then the Lord said, since the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah has become great, since their sin has become very grave, I'll descend now and see. So notice this. This God, first off, this God doesn't just throw lightning bolts down. That's a big shift, right? If you're an ancient civilization, the gods act from here and they punish up here, down there. This God, Israel's God, so beautiful when you think about this. Israel's God comes down. Israel's God walks among you. Oh, right? Israel's God wants to descend, not ascend, descend. Come down, be a part of the thing. Interact with the people, love the people, show grace, compassion, connection. That's a very different perspective that many people will miss. But if you were an ancient person reading this, you'd say, who's this God? This God sounds pretty interesting. Tell me more about this God, right? The Hebrew God hears the cry of his people. And we see again, good people cry out to justice, and justice finds a way to bring new life. That's what's going to happen. And so notice this back and forth. Look at the slide. 50 to 45 to 20, down to 10, right? Abraham, because his God is just, because his God descends and bargains, Abraham is able to essentially, he's able to stand between God and his people, and he's able to be a part of justice. So beautiful. Think about the message that is for Israel. Israel, you will stand between God and the world, and you will partner with God in bringing justice and life everywhere you go. Heavy. Yeah, so good. The back and forth. Notice this gets down to 10. 10 people. And he saved 8, right, in the flood, covering the whole world. Right? So he'll save 10 from, the tiny towns of Sodom and Gomorrah. He's going to save 10. This is showing, even if you want to think about it in a gradual way, God is showing more and more grace, right? Israel's beginning to, and maybe it's not that God is changing, but maybe Israel's perception of their God is changing. Their God becomes more and more graceful the longer and the bigger their journey is. Yeah. Oh, I love it. Jesus says this. Jesus, who is, again, the picture, I would argue, of what Israel should and could be. Jesus ushers in this new reality. He says, look, kingdom of heaven, it happens here inside, happens with us. And so in this moment, it reminds me of Jesus. This moment, Jesus says, I came to show the Father. Right? I came to show you this kingdom reality, what it looks like. I came to show you what love and life look like. In Israel, you were called to do the same thing. The Jewish nation was called to show the rest of the world this is what shalom looks like, when nothing is missing and nothing is broken. Right? We bring peace, connection, repair everywhere we go. And so when we look at the person of Jesus, it's beautiful, it's fascinating. Right? We had God in the Old Testament who was willing to bargain, to go back and forth, to descend, to be among the people. Then we have Jesus in the New Testament who, again, interesting story, descend, be a part of the people. And what does it look like when Jesus shows the Father? I want you to think about this. O righteous Father, the world doesn't know you, but I do. And these disciples know who sent you. Who know you sent me. I have revealed you to them, and I will continue to do so. Then your love for me will be in them, and I will be in them. What a beautiful message to Israel. And when we do this, watch what happens. It's so good. Even in the middle of captivity, even in the middle of brokenness, in the middle of hopelessness, despair, here's what happens when we choose to show the Father, show the divine. Healing happens, right? I love this picture of Jesus because it reminds me so many stories in the Gospels. Someone is sick, leprosy, any kind of diseases. They've been waiting at the pool for years. They've been waiting for life to happen. Jesus shows up, the perfect picture of Israel and the divine, and says, this is what it looks like when God walks among you. He heals the sick, right? Those diseases don't stand a chance. Beautiful, right? Gave people vision. Like, think about that metaphorically and literally, right? When the divine shows up, when we see justice happen all around us, because we are partnering with the divine, our eyes are opened. We begin to see beyond. There's something so much bigger going on. We see the deeper narrative that's been happening behind the scenes, and we can't help but be happy, right? We can't help but smile. We know the thing that's going on behind the scenes. Jesus fed the poor and the needy, right? There's this moment, I hope you remember this. He fed the 5,000, right? Which really was closer to probably like 15,000 if you want to go literally. But the idea here, beautiful, right? The story is about learning to give, learning to share. When we give what we have to the world, it's multiplied. And that is a divine action, right? When we as a people, Israel, as Americans, as human beings, when we give what we have, everything, it's multiplied. In Israel, this picture is so heavy, so beautiful. Yeah. And then lastly, Jesus brought the ostracized in, right? Women, think about the woman with the issue of blood, right? She was pushed out of community. And yet she knew there's this individual who stands between God and our community, and he's ushering in justice. She finds him, and Jesus heals her, right? And he even calls her back. He says, I want to reinstate you into community. He does all of this with her. He brings in the ostracized, the marginalized, the sinners, right? This is what it looks like to show the Father. And so for Israel in this moment, in this epic moment, when they read chapter 18, they're saying, our God is so good. Our God is just. Our God walks among us. Our God brings justice. Our God is graceful. So good. In the middle of their captivity, they realize this, and it gives them power. It gives them hope. And the picture of Jesus here, I came to show the Father, it does the very same thing for us today. It did that for people during the Roman occupation when Jesus' message was shared. And I would argue it can do the same thing for us. So how do we take it home? This was a fun one. I would argue this is a really beautiful one that most people overlook. How do we take it home? Here's what I was thinking. How do you find Jesus? Right? There are books written about this, right? How do you find Jesus? How is Jesus revealed? For me, there are just three simple things. And again, not to make a formula, not to write a book, here's how you do it. This is for me, what I've been finding rings true. Number one is really simple. Spend time with Jesus, right? Whatever that means to you, I don't know what that means to you. Whether it's prayer, whether it's reading, etc., reading the gospel. For me, when I spend time reading the gospel messages, when I read the teachings of Jesus, like it rings true. There's power, there's beauty. It challenges me to be a better human being. Another thing, spend time with his followers. You'll know his followers by their actions, right? When you make connections with people and you know, oh yeah, like that is a mini Christ, right? That is someone who lives the teachings of Jesus. And sometimes they call themselves other things. Sometimes it's not Christian. Sometimes it's a different name, a different tag, right? But if they're living the teachings of Jesus, it becomes evident in their actions. Spend time with those people. And then lastly, practice his teachings daily. Find ways to live out these messages. We'll fail, we always do, but find new ways of trying to live them out, learning to bring the marginalized in, learning to show grace, learning to forgive, those different teachings, when we practice them, they become a reality to us. Everyone, I hope you enjoyed this one. I love looking at the concepts of Genesis and then bringing it back to Jesus. I think there's so much beauty there. So, as always, please consider working with us, donating ethos-church.org/donate. We are a tax-deductible organization, and we think that what we do is important. And if you want to travel with us in this journey, please consider giving that tax-deductible donation. Ethos Living Rooms, we continue to try to grow that online community. Email me if you want to be a part of that, if that sounds interesting. And as always, hit that subscribe button. Share this video. We want to continue growing these videos, the viewership of these videos. Thank you, everyone, so much. Next week, we get into chapter 19. There is some heavy, heavy work to be done. And so get ready. Put on your seatbelts. For now, take care. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you next week.